Do you often find that you need a distraction from everyday life?
Do you like true crime, conspiracy theories, paranormal stories, and other weird, dark tales?
Well, tune in and turn up Weird Distractions Podcast, where we, your hosts, Christy
and Alex,
bring you a weird distraction to help you get through the work week.
Every Sunday morning, you can find our show on Apple Podcasts, Anchor, Spotify, Good Pods, and more.
So, grab a snack, get comfy,
and make sure to lock those doors. Need a distraction? We got you.
Hey everybody, as you know, the pandemic has really wreaked havoc on small businesses, and that's why I've decided to help a friend of mine out. Lil and Grace is a locally gay, indigenous-owned small business that specializes in one-of-a-kind handmade and homemade items for yourself or your loved ones. Or maybe you want to send someone you hate something. From stuffed llamas to avocados, quilts, masks, pillows, help keep money local by shopping local at lilandgrace.com. Use code TRUE to get 20% off your mask purchase. Code expires on December 15th, 2020. That's lilandgrace.com. lilandgrace.com. Use code TRUE to get 20% off. True Consequences is a proud member of the Barelas Podcasters Guild.
The Oracl Network. Look deeper.
True Consequences is a true crime and mystery podcast with stories based in New Mexico and the American Desert Southwest. I'm your host, Eric Carter-Landin. Hey Alex, man, it's so good to be recording with you today. It's been a while, and I think the last time was our super spooky Halloween special for Dos Pequeños. How you holding up, man?
I'm well, buddy. I'm good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, for those of my listeners who have yet to listen to Dos Pequeños, I'd like you, Alex, to just tell us a little bit about our crazy shit show that we have.
Well, it's a New Mexico paranormal show that I do with you. And we like to look at paranormal events that happen around the state and kind of giggle at it.
Yeah, it's a comedy show.
Yeah.
And we don't take ourselves too seriously, and we don't know anything about anything, so...
And why aren't you listening yet?
Yeah, come on, get it together. There's about, I think, 13 episodes now.
Yeah, we have 13.
Lucky 13.
Yeah, lucky 13. I didn't even think of it that way.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
We got to stop now. We're done.
Yeah, that's it. Hang it up. We're finished.
It's over.
We've reached our peak. Now it's nothing but the downhill.
It's all
slide.
downhill.
Yeah, and you can be right there witnessing it.
Okay, I got to think about when this episode's coming out. So this is coming out next Sunday. I'll be 40 years old when this comes out.
God, you seem so much older.
I know. Just a few more days. So go check out our show. It's super fun. And if you like spooky stuff, it's definitely the place to be. If you like New Mexico spooky stuff, it's even better for you. We're having a lot of fun recording it. And it's definitely less of a bummer than True Consequences.
Yeah, it's not too bummerish.
Yeah, and speaking of True Consequences and bummer stories.
We got a good one today.
Yeah, today we're going to be discussing a very famous case out of the southern part of the state in Las Cruces. And for those of you that are new to the show and not from New Mexico, Las Cruces is, I believe, the second largest city in New Mexico. There's a giant university, New Mexico State University there. It's growing. It's about 50 miles north of El Paso, and it's a lot warmer than it is here in Albuquerque. This case and the problems that resulted during the investigation led to the parents of the victim advocating to change laws.
That's right. We're talking about the murder of Katie Sepich. Katie's mom was so motivated to change the laws in New Mexico after her daughter's murder that she actually lobbied for Katie's law. The law is federally funded and requires that states collect DNA from convicted felons to store them in a database. This resulted in 25 other states adopting the law, which is really incredible.
It's amazing. I have so much admiration for victim families that go on to advocate and make changes to the law. This is meaningful change, and it's had a massive impact in the way that DNA is processed. It definitely helped to solve this case, and I think that it was a smart move on her mom's part to go that route, because it's really hard when you're a family member of a victim of murder, because you just feel so powerless. And I definitely look up to her and hope that, she feels that Katie's death is not in vain. I definitely believe that it was not in vain, and some positive things have resulted from it. She's definitely an inspiration for me. So let's get into the case. On August 31st, 2003, a Las Cruces couple decided to take an afternoon to do some target practice near the foothills in Las Cruces. As they were driving around, they noticed a woman lying in the desert. The couple got out of their vehicle to investigate and noticed that the woman was not responsive. They called 911 for assistance. And because this happened outside the city limits, both city and county officers were dispatched to the area near Paseo Del Onate in the foothills. The body was nude from the waist down and showed evidence of sexual assault. There was slight bruising on her neck and petechiae in her eyes.
What is that?
It's when your eyes are bloody from strangulation, usually.
The blood vessels burst.
They burst. It's typically an indication of strangulation. She had defensive wounds on her hands and arms. Investigators also noticed that her back was burned. It looked like the suspect had used an accelerant and lit her body on fire in an attempt to destroy evidence. It became clear that the woman's body was left there after she had been assaulted and murdered elsewhere. There were tire and footprints nearby. Police noted the fresh tire tracks and immediately began taking photos as well as creating a plaster cast of the tracks. And from her autopsy, the OMI found blood and skin cells under the victim's fingernails. There also was a stray pubic hair, as well as bodily fluids on her body. DNA was collected and was taken in as evidence. It wasn't long after the body was discovered that police had a clue as to who it was that they had found. A missing person report was called into the police for a New Mexico State University student named Katie Sepich. The person who called in the report was her roommate, Tracy Waters. She had become concerned because no one had seen Katie since the night before. 22-year-old Katie Sepich was described as a brilliant, engaging, and beautiful girl. Her family called her Kamikaze Katie because she was fearless. She was said to be larger than life, and friends said she did everything 300%. She never did anything halfway, and she always gave her all. She was in graduate school at NMSU for business, and she was originally from Carlsbad, New Mexico, which is in the southeast corner of the state, famous for Carlsbad Caverns. She was a bright young woman with her whole life ahead of her. So Alex, why don't you take us through Katie's timeline from the night before the murder?
So once the police identified Katie and her father confirmed her identity, they started working on investigating the murder. They immediately started to collect evidence as well as interview witnesses to try to establish what had happened. Investigators went to Katie's house and saw that the screen of her bedroom window was propped against the wall and her shoes were found near the window. There was also evidence of a struggle in the yard. Police believed that Katie was trying to break into her bedroom after a night of partying. It was later discovered, though, that Katie had left her purse, keys, and cell phone with her boyfriend. It is believed that when she was trying to break into her room, that's when she was actually attacked. It is thought that Katie was attacked at her home in the side yard when she was murdered and then later dropped in the landfill near the foothills. Police interviewed a man we will call Jay, and he claims the following in the police report. Quote, on Saturday, August 30th, 2003, he slept until approximately 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and then spoke to his friend, who is also his next-door neighbor. He stated that later in the day that he and his roommate and his neighbor traveled to El Sombrero restaurant located on Loman Avenue.
Have you ever been there?
No.
It's delicious.
I've only been to Las Cruces like one time, and that was for a conference, and it was kind of in and out, but it's really pretty down there. The mountains.
That restaurant has the best tacos. They're like if my grandma made tacos and sold them in a restaurant. They're so good. Anyway.
Sponsor us.
Back to the story. Sorry.
He said they arrived there at approximately 7 p.m. and were there until about 8:30 p.m. While eating at this restaurant, Jay stated he ran into a subject identified as Joe, who according to the briefing was the boyfriend of the victim. He stated Joe pointed out Katie, who is the victim, at the register of the restaurant, stated that she was the girlfriend. Jay stated he looked over to where she was and determined that she was an employee at this restaurant, working the cash register. He stated after speaking with Joe for a while, he finished and eating, and then he and his friends left the restaurant at approximately 8:30 p.m. They went back to his house, whereupon he took a shower after doing so and entertained a friend of his named Matt, who came over on his brother's motorcycle. He said that they then traveled to another friend's house, identified as Red, and they went skateboarding for a while. After doing this, he and Matt went cruising to look for parties, and they went to a party a couple of blocks away on Renfrew Street, which is located off of Locust. However, the police had broken it up early. They then left this location and went to the Albertsons on Loman, arriving there at approximately 11:45, and brought some beer and then went to Red's house. He said that they had bought 2 6-packs of Honey Brown, and he used a credit card to purchase these items. He stated after leaving the Albertsons that they went to a house where Joe was and at a group of people that had gathered to socialize. He stated this was off Roadrunner Parkway, and he stated while there he helped fix a water heater, and after doing so, these groups of people, most of whom he had met at one time or another, informed him that they were going to leave and go to a bar. He said while at the house, he did encounter the victim and spoke briefly to her. Katie went with this group of people to the bar that they were going to. He then went to Red's house and to the fraternity house, which is located just north of the TKE house on University Avenue, unquote.
So, I'm confused by the fixing the water heater, but...
Why was he, like, I came to this party, while I'm here, let me
I might as well fix your water heater?
Fix your water heater.
Okay, cool.
So Jay consented to having his DNA collected for the investigation after completing the interview.
All right, well... probably not likely to be the killer then. Police continued conducting interviews to try to determine what happened that night before Katie's murder. Katie was said to have went to a local bar called Brouhaha after leaving a house party. Investigators went there and spoke with a bartender. He said that he knew Katie personally and that he was good friends with her. He confirmed that she did arrive with a large group of her friends on Saturday night, August 30th. Katie left the bar after he had closed at approximately 1:30 a.m. He stated she was one of the last people to leave the bar, and he did not see anything suspicious about her behavior, nor did it seem that she was unhappy in any way. Police also spent time collecting surveillance footage from local businesses near places where Katie was on Saturday night, while also tracking down partygoers to determine what happened. One such partygoer was a woman named Susan, and here is her account of what happened per the official police report. Quote, "She claims she arrived at the party between 9 and 10 p.m. with her brother Matt, a subject named Sean, and Joe Biscoff. She stated that she left around midnight when everybody decided to go to the Brouhaha pub located on University and Valley. She stated that she was not 21 years old and was unable to go to the bar and only dropped off people there. She then went to her Pi Beta Phi house, which is a sorority, and arrived there at approximately 12:30 a.m. She stayed there until about 2:15 a.m. and then went back to the party located on Los Misioneros, arriving there approximately 2:30 a.m. She stated that she hadn't been there that long, which was approximately 20 minutes when her brother Matt asked her to take him home. So she did this, left the party 5 or 10 minutes before 3 a.m. with her brother Matt. They went to Jack in the Box, located on the corner of Loman and Telshore. They stayed in line at the Jack in the Box for approximately 20 minutes until getting their food, and that she took him home to Selden Street, which is by the skate park off of Walnut. She stated that she was unsure of the address on Selden Street. She then returned to the party on Los Misioneros Court immediately and did not stop anywhere else. She believes she arrived back at the party at approximately 3:45 a.m. End quote. Shortly after this, she claimed there were only a few people left at the party, and she kissed Joe Biscoff, which, as you remember, was Katie's boyfriend. Some accounts claim that Katie saw them kissing and stormed out of the party, and that Joe chased after her, and they argued. She left her purse, keys, and phone at the house party. And when investigators learned this, they immediately started to look closer at Joe as a potential suspect. Police became suspicious of him and his behavior almost immediately. When he was asked by police and Katie's mom if they had argued, he denied it. Police later learned that that was untrue. He also refused to speak with police after his initial interview and refused to provide a DNA sample. He became uncooperative with the police, and here's an excerpt from the police report of Joe's initial interview. Quote, "During the interview, he told me that they went to the brew. After the bar closed, they returned to Mike's house located in the Missions. He stated that he and Sean went looking for Katie for approximately 30 minutes around 0300 hours. He stated they took Katie's vehicle and drove around the Roadrunner area. He also stated that they did go by her house but did not stop because they didn't see any lights on. He did admit to hitting the curb and Orange Barrel and thought that they were near the north end of Roadrunner. The reason they thought this was because of the Orange Barrel, and he remembered going under an overpass to get onto Roadrunner again. He stated after looking for her, they went back to Mike's house. He stated this was around 0330 hours, and he fell asleep on the couch with his roommate's sister, Susan. He stated they woke up around 8:30 or 9, and then drove Tracy back to the address on Frontier. During the interview, he stated when he woke up that morning, he did try to call Katie, but she did not answer her phone." End quote.
Investigators were frustrated that Joe wasn't talking with them, so they figured out another way to get information from him. They bugged Katie's grave in hopes that Joe would divulge any information that he had about the murder while visiting the gravesite. He did not show up to the funeral, and the recording device did not yield any new information for them. Police learned that the day before Katie was murdered, Joe had bought her a blue topaz ring. They even went to the store where it was purchased to confirm the date of the purchase. They obtained Katie's sheets from her bed in an attempt to get Joe's DNA from the sheets. They did find male DNA on the sheets and checked it and confirmed that Joe was no longer a suspect, as DNA didn't match what was found on her body. Joe was then cleared from the pool of suspects. So police also collected 30-plus DNA samples from multiple other men. The DNA that was collected from Katie's body was run through CODIS, the law enforcement database, and there was no match available for it, unfortunately. This meant that investigators had to start turning over every rock and interviewing more people and collecting more DNA. And one thing they did learn from the DNA was that it came from a male of Native American, Puerto Rican, and South American descent. Of course, this wasn't enough information to narrow down who the killer was, but it was at least a means to rule out certain individuals from the party. With the DNA leading nowhere, investigators had to start looking into what little evidence they had, the tire tracks. Talking to partygoers and Katie's cell phone seemed like a good place to start. So several witnesses from the party were interviewed, and not many of the witnesses had much to offer except for one woman who claims that she saw Katie upset walking around the backyard, asking if they had seen her purse. She left angrily after being unable to locate it, and shortly after she stated a man walked out of the house holding the purse and looking for Katie. The woman claimed that her phone started ringing from inside the purse. The man answered it, and then once he hung up the phone, he turned to a group of women and started flirting with them. This was allegedly Katie's boyfriend, Joe. Police proceeded to retrieve Katie's phone from evidence and started to document the calls that were made in order to see if there were any connection to potential suspects. Reviewing the phone's voicemail, Katie received a voicemail on August 31st at 12:50 p.m. from her boyfriend, Joe. She received another on August 31st at 1:20 p.m. again from her boyfriend, Joe. And she had also received a message from her father and a few of her friends.
Meanwhile, investigators are going to all the local tire shops to try and identify the tire cast. And they also asked the shops to keep an eye out for similar tires. Police learned that the tire tracks were made by a set of Bridgestone Dueler ATLT 21575 R15 tires. This helped them inform local tire shops that these were the specific tires they were looking for. Several leads came in from the shops, but none of them resulted in any information that was helpful, nor did they lead investigators any closer to finding Katie's killer. This was extremely frustrating for police and Katie's family. It was made worse by the fact that people came out of the woodwork to give statements, and hardly any of them were credible. There were people accusing their ex-boyfriends, others claiming that Katie was a domestic violence victim, which was unsubstantiated. There were people saying that they saw her get into a white car. There was just stories all over the place. The case went cold, and there were no new leads until something happened 1,500 miles away in the Midwest city of Green Bay, Wisconsin. In August 2003, same month and year that Katie was killed, a woman was attacked, strangled, raped, and set on fire in Green Bay. This case bore so many similarities to Katie's case and immediately raised red flags for investigators. But the main difference was she survived. So there were two men accused of this heinous crime. They were Gregorio Morales and Juan Nieto, both of whom had connections to New Mexico. Morales lived in Roswell, and Nieto had family in Las Cruces. Morales had been arrested in the Green Bay case, which led to investigators collecting his DNA, as well as the DNA of Nieto, for comparison to the sample that was found in Katie's case. However, the DNA did not match those suspects. Nieto was arrested in Atlanta and eventually extradited to Wisconsin. So unfortunately, that didn't really do anything. Police would spend months and even years chasing down every possible lead they could find. They collected so much DNA and looked at multiple vehicles only to come up empty-handed. And then, something unexpected happened. In December 2006, an unknown subject's DNA was entered into CODIS, and it matched the DNA that had been processed from Katie's murder scene. This was it. They'd finally found Katie's killer. Alex, do you mind reading the report?
Quote, December 18th, 2006. I was contacted by John Kerbosh, administrator for New Mexico DNA Identification System Administrative Center, Combined DNA Index System, or CODIS. He informed me that unknown suspects' DNA from this case entered into CODIS got a match. He stated the DNA profile of Gabriel Adrian Avila was put into CODIS after he entered the New Mexico correctional system. The sample was analyzed and the profile was entered into CODIS. On Monday, December 11th, 2006, the system was uploaded and his office discovered the profile of Avila matched the profile to our unknown suspect. Gabriel Adrian Avila is currently an inmate at the Roswell Correctional Center in Hagerman, New Mexico. The match was confirmed by fingerprint and triple checks and by a repeat DNA analysis of Avila's NMDIS DNA sample. The match came from the evidence taken from the fingernail D2 and the vaginal swab. End quote. This was it. They found him after 3 years of chasing down leads to nowhere. They finally had their guy. They then started the work of solidifying Gabriel as a suspect.
I can't imagine how relieved these investigators must have been. I mean, they spent 3 years, and I was reading through all of the reports, Alex, like it was absurd, some of the claims that people were making, and people were just coming out of nowhere. Like one girl was like, oh, my ex-boyfriend came home and he had blood on his shirt. I'm pretty sure he killed her. And like,
and that happens all
the time. Yeah.
These false memories, these people that just make up the stories. It happens all the time.
And a lot of them were 2-3 years after the fact. They come forward with information. And probably my guess is because there was a reward associated with information. But
or people look for notoriety. They want to be involved somehow in the story or in the process of it being solved.
It's really frustrating to me to read things like this, because I just wish that people would, if they don't have anything actually to add, like stay out of it. You're not helping anything. You're making it worse. The investigators spent so much time chasing down all of these leads, and there are so many other interviews that I read through that were just absurd, that led from one person to another. Like there was one where somebody claimed this guy had said that he witnessed Katie being hit by Joe.
Right.
So, and this came from like 3 people away from him. When they finally talked to the guy, he was like, no, I said that Joe was in a bad mood.
Yeah. And so it also makes you wonder how many times that has, these false claims and stuff actually imprison the wrong people. Mm-hmm. Which I'm sure it happens all the time too. It
happens a lot. I mean, if it didn't, there wouldn't be a need for the Innocence Project or any of those other organizations out there trying to exonerate people who have been wrongfully convicted. And, I don't necessarily blame police. I mean, they had to follow where the leads were. It made sense for them to start with somebody who was close to her, with her boyfriend. That's always how these investigations go. But I do get angry at the civilians that come out of the woodwork with these crazy claims and don't have anything of value to add, that just basically wastes everybody's time and misdirects people. We're going to take a quick break.
Let's get back to the story.
Okay.
Quote, Detective Myers made contact with Roswell Correctional Institute in Roswell, New Mexico, and learned that Gabriel Adrian Avila was indeed an inmate there in the institution. Detective Myers and I began to gather some background information on Gabriel and learned that his ex-wife was living at Defiant Street in Las Cruces, New Mexico. We also learned that Gabriel used to own a 1984 Datsun truck that had since been sold to John B., who lives in an address on Cloudcroft Circle in Las Cruces, New Mexico. I drove over to the residence and observed that parked in the street in front of the residence on Cloudcroft Circle was a 1984 beige or cream-colored Datsun 4x4 truck bearing New Mexico license plate. The truck had a set of Michelin brand tires, and reading the case file when I was first assigned to the local cold case unit, I had learned that the tire tracks were found at the crime scene were later identified as having been made on a set of Bridgestone Duelers, ATLT T1575R15 tires. I made contact with Detective Myers and told him that the truck had different set of tires on it, and he suggested we start checking the tire stores around town, and maybe we could locate one that had sold Gabriel a set of tires. Detective Myers Myers and I checked the tire stores at the Walmart store located on Lowman Avenue, Discount Tire on Tell Shore Avenue, and Sears Tires on Mesilla Valley Mall, as well as the Goodyear Tires on El Paso. However, we were unable to locate any information on Gabriel buying any new tires from these stores. We then checked the Big O Tire store here in Las Cruces, and we learned on 12/13/03 that Gabriel bought a set of 4 tires from Big O and then had them put on a 1984 Datsun truck.
So here's some more information from the police report regarding an interview that was conducted with Avila's ex-wife. On 12/20/06, Detective Myers and I made contact with Avila, whom we had learned was the ex-wife of Gabriel Avila. We learned from her she was divorced from Gabriel Avila and they had divorced sometime in early 2004, and that he was currently in prison in Roswell, New Mexico. We told her we had reason to believe that her ex-husband had been involved in a homicide in August of 2003, and we wanted to know if she knew anything about the homicide, and if she knew anything about his comings and goings around the end of August 2003. She told us she knew nothing of a homicide, and as best as she could remember, she stated that he had started acting strangely sometime in August 2003, and that there were times when he would come home late from work, and sometimes she would find him asleep in the truck in the driveway of the home where she still lives. She told us that Gabriel told her he started using cocaine in August of 2003. We asked her about the vehicle that Gabriel Avila drove, and she told us it was a 1980s year model Datsun that was cream colored, had since been sold by her father to her sister's ex-boss. She told us her father had given them the truck when they first were married, and Gabriel was the only one who drove the truck. We asked her if Gabriel Avila had ever given her any jewelry. She told us he had not. However, Avila remembered that there was a time in April 2004 that Gabriel was on the run from the police. She advised that she had received a phone call from one of Gabriel's friends who told her that he had got a phone call from Gabriel and told him to call his wife and have her go pick up the truck, which he had left abandoned at a McDonald's restaurant on Avenida de Mesilla. Herself and her brother located the truck, took it to her brother's house up on East Mesa. A few days later, herself and her brother, her sister-in-law, and dad were cleaning out the truck so they could get it ready to sell, when her sister-in-law found a lady's silver in color ring with 5 diamond-looking stones in it in the ashtray of the truck. Her sister-in-law asked if the ring belonged to her. She told her no. She had never seen the ring before. She stated that she held on to the ring, believing that her ex-husband had stolen it from somebody or had bought it for another girl. She placed the ring in her coin purse and forgot about it until 2 months later when she was going through her purse and found the ring again. She then placed it in her jewelry box at home. We asked her if she still had the ring. She said that she believed she did. She went to her room, came back a few moments later, and showed us a silver-colored lady's ring with 5 diamond-looking stones on it.
Holy shit.
End quote. This was one of Katie's missing rings that was described by many friends. Police had even seen photos of the ring when they went to jewelry stores early on in the investigation. The evidence of Avila's guilt was mounting. Police then headed to Hagerman, New Mexico, to the correctional facility to interview Avila. They told him about the DNA match and the evidence they had against him. They read him his Miranda rights and he agreed to be interviewed. After being presented with everything, he knew he was caught. He confessed to everything. On December 26, 2006, 3 years and nearly 4 months after Katie was killed, Gabriel Avila was charged with 1 count of first-degree murder, 2 counts of criminal sexual penetration, tampering with evidence, and kidnapping. And a May 2007 Albuquerque Journal article is quoted as, quote, Gabriel Avila was sentenced to 69 years in prison after pleading guilty Thursday to the 2003 rape and murder of New Mexico State University graduate student Katie Sepich. State District Judge Douglas Driggers ordered Avila, a 27-year-old Mexican national, to serve the sentence after finishing a 9-year sentence he was now serving on an unrelated 2004 conviction for aggravated burglary. The case was the impetus for a new state law requiring many suspects to provide DNA samples to authorities. End quote. The whole thing was crazy. The whole case, start to finish, was insane.
It sounds like a movie.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Up until the very end when they're talking to the girl and the ring is like being kind of the final nail in the coffin and everything. It's quite a story.
Yeah. I can't imagine how difficult it must have been for her family for those 3 years of, just feeling the frustration of not knowing what was going on, no suspects being identified, Nothing really feeling like it was probably moving from their perspective. They probably didn't see all of the behind the scenes stuff that was happening. Like I said in the beginning of this, man, her mom is just amazing. The fact that she saw that as a huge loophole and a huge opportunity, because this guy had so many charges and convictions against him. Like his DNA should have been submitted prior to this. They would have been able to find him immediately.
You know, that's the thing that I remembered I was trying to talk about it before, was that I was reading this case and everything. It seems so very 1972.
2003, dude.
And this was 2003,
Yeah.
and Katie's Law wasn't even in effect. And
Yeah.
so, I mean, I'm glad something positive can come out of something so negative.
Yeah. It's never going to bring Katie back. It's never going to take that loss away from her family, but hopefully it'll prevent any other families from going through that, because we do have a problem here in New Mexico of repeat offenders being let out and brought back in, and let out and brought back in. And, you know, I talked about it in the Victoria Martins episodes that I had at the beginning of this season. You know, it just illustrates the problems that we have here. And the more I research cases in New Mexico, the more I see these problems. And I'm so grateful to Katie's parents for fighting for this.
Yeah.
And the fact that it's now in 26 states, like it should be in 50 states.
I was going to say, why isn't it in all the states?
Who knows? Who knows?
Who's fighting that?
Right.
You know?
Yeah. I mean, if you're a regular, you know, in and out of the prison system, violent offender, I'm sorry. You lose the right to your privacy on the DNA, in my opinion. Like this guy had so many opportunities to get his life together. And when they interviewed him, he said, I don't know, man, I just lost it. Wow. And like attacked her. Like it was just a random attack. I
mean, was there a little bit more clues into actually what happened? Did he actually get her outside of her bedroom window and everything?
Yeah. Yeah. He saw her trying to get in. She was probably intoxicated.
Right.
She didn't have her keys because she left that with her boyfriend, and it was totally a crime of opportunity.
Right. Well, most are.
Yeah. But she was such a beautiful, smart person who was loved. I mean, reading through some of these interviews, people loved her. They cared about her so much, and it's just heartbreaking that this happened. And it's even worse that they had to endure 3 years of not knowing. So I'm glad they got him. Glad he's in jail. I don't think 69 years is enough. In my opinion, he should probably be there forever.
Well, how old is he?
I don't know how old he was when he was arrested.
I mean, 70 years is pretty much a life sentence.
Yeah, he'll probably die in prison.
Yeah.
I'm more of a fan of the 3 life sentences consecutive.
250 years.
Yeah. Yeah, that's more.
You just know there's no hope. There's no hope at that point.
So he was born in 1969. So he's
in his 50s.
Yeah.
So that means that's a death sentence.
Yeah, I know he's going to die.
That's going to be the rest of his life in prison.
Yeah. Horrible case, man.
Yes, it was a very horrible case, but like you said, there is really some good that comes out of it, and that's kind of nice.
Yeah.
Ms. Sepich, please. And just repeat your name again, who you represent. Thank you.
My name's Jay Ann Sepich. I'm testifying on my own behalf, and I'm standing in strong support of this bill. And you're going to be getting a copy of my business card because I'm going to refer to that real quickly in my testimony. This is my daughter, Katie. Katie was a 22-year-old graduate student. She was very brutally raped, viciously beaten. She was sodomized, murdered, and her body was set on fire and dumped in the desert. Katie fought really hard for her life, and as a result of that fight, she had the skin and blood of the man that killed her under her fingernails. That was the only clues that we had to her murder, was the DNA that was extracted from that. A profile was created and it was uploaded in the National Criminal Forensic Database called CODIS. I thought that everyone that was arrested for a felony had their cheek swabbed because they took their fingerprints and they took their photographs, and I found out this was not true. We did not have a match in CODIS, and I made the offhand comment that this man was such a monster he would be arrested for something else. His DNA would be taken and we would stop him. And the detective in charge of that case said, no, it's illegal to do that. I felt like I'd been kicked in the stomach. I did research over the next 2 years, and in 2005 I went to my state legislature in New Mexico, and they passed an arrestee bill. And since then I've been an advocate nationwide for this. You have my business card, and I want you to look on the back of my business card because this is very important. When someone spits into a tube and sends it to Ancestry.com or 23andMe, they're giving them all 3 billion of their markers in their DNA genome. All 3 billion. CODIS doesn't use that. CODIS uses only 20 markers. And these 20 markers were specifically selected by genetic scientists because they have no ability to disclose any genetic information whatsoever other than gender. What's printed in blue on the back of my business card is my profile as it would go into CODIS. In other words, if I were arrested for a felony, what's in blue in the back of my business card is the actual information that would go into CODIS.
And what does it say about you?
Nothing genetically. It says I'm a female. There's one marker that says I'm a female. The most renowned genetic scientist in the world could not tell from that CODIS profile whether I have a predisposition to any disease, my ethnicity, any personal, private genetic information, because those are non-coding markers.
So what would it use to identify you?
I don't know how many of you remember, as I do, what a 33 RPM record album looks like.
I've got plenty of them.
Okay. If you know what that looks like, and you've played them and you've used them, you know that there's bands where the music is, and there's spaces in between it. When you put the needle down in those bands, it plays music. When you put the needle down in those spaces, there's no music. These 20 markers are markers that were selected because they're the spaces in the genome. They're non-coding. There's no genetic information. But the spaces are so unique to each individual that if those 20 markers match, there's only a chance 1 out of a number 1 with 18 zeros that any two people on the face of the earth could have that same genetic code, except for identical twins. So when those 20 markers match, it's very highly unlikely that it could be anyone else other than that person. But those 20 markers have no ability to disclose any genetic information about that individual, and that's so important. In this bill, with the substitute, it would be for violent felonies and burglary. And the reason I want to address that, 53% of the matches to violent crimes across the nation are because of burglary arrests or convictions. So that's why it's important. After they've made sure that there was no error, then they go to a computer that is administered by the crime lab. And what's in that computer is J.N. Sepich is specimen number 01745. And then they can't release that information to anyone except the investigative team that's working on that crime. I know this for a fact. When they got the match on my daughter, they couldn't call me and say, "Oh, Mrs. Sepich, we've gotten a match. We've gotten a match on." They couldn't. They could only release it to the investigative team. They used that as a lead. They went out, got more evidence. Within 1 week, they found the ring that my daughter was wearing that night in the man's truck that they got the match to. They found the tire tracks. They found that the tire tracks that were left by her body matched the tires on his truck. And so they had enough evidence with that DNA to actually charge him. Then they could tell us, the family. So privacy is so protected, and I think that's very, very important. I can tell you it does make a difference, and let me tell you real quickly. Louisiana passed their arrestee DNA law, and their arrestee DNA law is...
Louisiana, our neighbor?
Louisiana, your neighbor. Every person arrested for any felony in Louisiana has their cheeks swabbed at the time of booking, when their fingerprints and photographs are taken. They passed this law in 2003, and Louisiana has a population of 4.6 million people, and they have over 400,000 arrestee DNA profiles in CODIS. Texas, with a population of 28.7 million people, has 80,000 arrestee DNA profiles in CODIS.
So we are the needle in the proverbial haystack here for solving a crime like this.
New Mexico, my home state, which has a population of 2 million people, tiny population-wise, we have had over 1,800 matches between crime scenes and those arrested for a felony.
Since when?
Since 2007, January 1st, 2007.
So they've been able to clear 1,800 violent offenses.
They've had, some of those were not violent. Some of those matched to things like car theft.
It's
still a crime. But there's been a lot of homicides and a lot of sexual assaults. And I do have a spreadsheet that delineates what the cheek swab was taken for and what the crime was that it matched to.
You have it with you right now?
I don't, but I can email it to you.
Can you get it to each and every member here?
I can. I need your emails. I don't know that,
we'll
but I can. I can email that and that's updated every month.
Thank you.
So why does this matter? Oh, California is getting 10 matches on average every day to their DNA database. Every day. Of course, California is a huge state. Why does this matter? It matters because Texas is necessarily missing out on those matches. Let me give you some examples. When Houston started uploading their untested rape kits into CODIS, the first 6,600 rape kits that they uploaded saw 850 matches. That's a 13% match rate. I think that's wonderful because that means out of every 100 rape kits they put into CODIS, 13 of those saw a match to an offender. But in Ohio, which has all felony arrests, they swab every arrestee that is arrested for a felony at the time of booking. When they uploaded the first 8,115 untested kits, they had 3,030 matches, which is around 40%. We're talking about lives that we can impact so positively. We're talking about rape victims that have waited for years and years and years to know who raped them. I've been working on this since 2005, and I now know personally and friends with 3 mothers whose daughters would still be alive if their states had passed this bill when we first asked them to. Their daughters would be alive if their states had passed this law the first time we went to them and asked them to. I never thought this would happen to my daughter. I really never thought this would happen to my daughter, but it did. And we know it can. And I really hope that we can stop it from happening to other daughters, because I know the power of DNA.
Well, my heart goes out to her family and her friends and to everybody involved in the case, and I'm glad that this monster got put away. Hopefully he didn't hurt anybody else in those 3 years that he was free. I guess that's all I have to say. Anything else you want to add, sir?
No, sir. Thank you so much for having me on again. I miss recording with you. I always jump at the opportunity to come sit with you and talk.
I appreciate it. I'm glad you're here. I didn't want to go through this by myself.
No, I feel you.
Thank you, everybody, for listening. If you want to support True Consequences, you can go to ko-fi/True Consequences or patreon.com/True Consequences. I am listener supported. I appreciate all of my patrons and I appreciate all my listeners. All support, doesn't have to be monetary. If you can leave me a review on your favorite podcatcher or tell your friends about me, tell your friends about True Consequences, get the word out, that helps as well. So grateful for all of you. I can't believe this is season 3. That's all I have to say. I hope you all have a wonderful Thanksgiving and stay safe, New Mexico.
5 families have hope for answers that would still be waiting if we hadn't expanded Katie's Law. To me, that's so important. 3 months after Katie was murdered, Gabriel Avila was arrested for aggravated burglary, but we didn't have Katie's Law in New Mexico then, so we couldn't take his DNA sample. Consequently, it was 3.5 years after her murder that his DNA was finally taken upon his burglary conviction, upon his incarceration. During that intervening time, over $200,000 was spent on her case alone. That's $200,000 that would have been saved by one cheek swab. Katie was 22 and had just started working on her master's of business administration when she went to a friend's house one night and got into an argument with her boyfriend. She decided to walk 5 blocks home. She was so angry that she left without her purse, without her keys, without her phone. And when she walked out of that party, it was the last time anyone saw her alive. Target shooters found her the next morning in an old city dump. Katie had been very brutally raped. She had been beaten. She had been sodomized. And she had been set on fire. There are no words to describe to you the agony that this caused our family. When we were told that Katie was missing, my husband chose to drive the 4 hours to her college town to look for her. And when he got there, the authorities had realized that the body that had been found that morning was most probably Katie. Katie's daddy had to go to the morgue and identify his daughter. And he later told me when they pulled back that sheet, and he was forced to look at her face, bruised, beaten, and contorted in pain, that he fell to his knees, and he asked God to take him there, right then and there. No father should ever live through that. No parent should. And I have to tell you that the hardest moment of my life was on that beautiful, cloudless September afternoon when I had to leave my baby at the cemetery, knowing that on this earth I would never again look into those big blue eyes, see that gorgeous smile, or feel her arms around me in that warm hug.
Thanks for listening to True Consequences. Follow me on Facebook and Instagram at True Consequences Pod, and on Twitter at TrueConsPod. True Consequences is listener supported. If you'd like to support this one-man show, please go to patreon.com/trueconsequences. Thanks for listening, and stay safe, New Mexico.